The umbrellas on the sand have not been folded for half a century. The hotel rooms still have the bedsheets that were turned down on a Wednesday morning in August. In the lobby of the Argo Hotel, the favorite of Elizabeth Taylor when she came to the island, a key once hung on a numbered hook for a guest who would not return. The door of the Toyota dealership on Leonidas Street stood open for years before it was looted, and inside, the showroom cars sat with the manufacturer plates still attached. The town is called Varosha. It was a 5-star Mediterranean resort. It is now the largest abandoned holiday city on Earth. This is the story of a Mediterranean tourist district that disappeared overnight, that has been fenced off behind barbed wire by the Turkish military for more than half a century, and whose original residents, most of them now elderly, many of them dead, still hold the deeds to property they have not been able to enter since they were children. In 1970, the 4 future members of the Swedish pop group ABBA arrived in Famagusta on a promotional holiday. It was the first time that Björn Ulvaeus, Benny Andersson, Agnetha Faltskog, and Anna-Frid Lyngstad performed together, in front of a small audience of Swedish United Nations peacekeepers stationed on the island. They sang a few songs and then went down to the beach. The beach in question was Glossa Beach, the long crescent of sand fronting Varosha. In the photographs from that trip, the future ABBA are smiling against a backdrop of high-rise hotels, construction cranes, and the Mediterranean. Varosha at that moment was the most fashionable beach resort in the eastern Mediterranean. Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton drank at the bar of the Argo Hotel. Raquel Welch swam at Glossa Beach. Brigitte Bardot was photographed there. The city's main avenue, called John F. Kennedy, was lined with the Asterias, the Grecian, the Florida, the King George, and the Argo. Leonidas Street, which crossed the avenue, was the bar district. There was a Toyota dealership, a major shopping street, and the highest concentration of luxury hotel rooms in the region. Famagusta was the engine of the Cypriot tourist economy. Varosha was its glittering heart. The population was roughly 39,000. In July of 1974, the Greek military junta in Athens orchestrated a coup against the elected president of Cyprus. 5 days later, the Turkish military invaded the northern part of the island, in what they called Operation Atilla, citing their right under the 1960 Treaty of Guarantee to protect the Turkish Cypriot community. Turkish forces advanced south. By the middle of August, they had reached the outskirts of Famagusta. The evacuation of Varosha lasted hours. The orders went out on the morning of the 14th of August, just before the Turkish army entered the streets. The British military base at Atilla, 20 miles down the coast, helped coordinate the movement of civilians. The 39,000 Greek Cypriot residents fled north and west, toward Paralimni, Dorinia, and Larnaca. Most of them carried what they could put into a single suitcase. The understanding, in nearly every household, was that they would be coming home in a day or two. They did not come home. By the end of August 1974, the Turkish army had fenced the entire district, an area of just over 6 square kilometers, with barbed wire and chain link, posted sentries, and declared the zone closed to all civilians. The fence ran along Glossa Beach. It crossed John F. Kennedy Avenue. It ran behind the back gardens of the houses on the western edge. For the next 46 years, the only people permitted to enter Varosha were Turkish soldiers and personnel of the United Nations peacekeeping force in Cyprus, the latter on inspection visits only. Inside the fence, the city did what cities do when no one is in them. Power failed. Roofs fell in. Plants came up through cracked tile floors. The fluorescent sign for a Toyota Corolla still hung in the window of the showroom on Leonidas Street, faded but intact, decades after the model on display had become a vintage car. Sea turtles came up from the water and began to nest on Glossa Beach. The British Broadcasting Corporation reported, in 2014, that the beach was now one of the cleanest stretches of sand in the eastern Mediterranean, because for 40 years no human being had walked there. In 1984, the United Nations Security Council passed Resolution 550, which declared that any attempt to settle Varosha by anyone other than its original Greek Cypriot inhabitants was, in the language of the resolution, inadmissible. The resolution was ignored. The fence stayed. In 2004, a comprehensive settlement plan called the Annan Plan, named after the Secretary-General of the United Nations, proposed to return Varosha to its original residence as part of a broader reunification of the island. The plan went to a referendum. Greek Cypriots rejected it. Turkish Cypriots accepted it. The fence stayed. Even before that, in 1997, during a standoff between the Cypriot government and Turkey over the proposed delivery of Russian surface-to-air missiles to the south of the island, the Turkish Cypriot leader Rauf Denktaş openly threatened to occupy the rest of Varosha and turn the abandoned town into a Turkish settlement if the missiles were delivered. The missiles were not delivered. The crisis passed. The fence stayed. During the long decades of closure, the city was systematically looted. Photographs released by reporters and aid workers who were occasionally permitted inside showed the same pattern in building after building. The furniture had been taken. The light fixtures had been taken. Even the wall sockets and the ceiling rosettes had been pried out. Doors had been forced. In the showrooms and shops along Leonidas Street, the inventory had been stripped down to the racks and the empty display stands. The place had been picked clean, slowly and methodically, over a period of decades, by people who knew that no one would arrive to stop them. Through all of those years, the people who had owned property in Varosha, the houses, the apartments, the hotels, the dealership, the shops on Leonidas Street, kept their deeds. 6,082 plots of land are recorded as having had legal owners on the morning of the 14th of August 1974. 425 of those plots faced the beach. Court cases trickled forward. In 2010, the European Court of Human Rights ruled in the principal case brought by a Cypriot businessman named Konstantinos Lordos and 7 others, finding that Turkey had violated their right to the peaceful enjoyment of their possessions and their right to private and family life. The court began awarding damages in similar cases, in some instances as much as €8 million, against the government of Turkey. 281 further claims by Greek Cypriot owners were filed with the Immovable Property Commission of Northern Cyprus. The damages were paid. The owners did not get the keys back. Then, in October of 2020, the Prime Minister of the self-declared Turkish Republic of Northern Cyprus, Ersin Tatar, announced that part of Varosha would be reopened to the public. 2 days later, on the 8th of October, a 600-meter stretch of Glossa Beach was opened. There were sun loungers. There were lifeguards. The Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan flew in to support the announcement. The original Greek Cypriot owners of the beach lounges, of the hotels, of the houses behind the dunes, were not invited. The announcement was condemned by the European Union as a serious violation of the United Nations ceasefire arrangements. The United Nations Security Council, in a presidential statement issued the following July, repeated that any settlement of Varosha by people other than its original inhabitants was inadmissible. Turkey rejected the statement. Northern Cyprus rejected the statement. The reopening continued. By 2022, sun beds and umbrellas had been installed along a 600 by 400 meter stretch of the beach for commercial use. By 2023, 3 of the original hotels, the Clio, the Golden Seaside, and the Aegean, had been purchased by a Turkish Cypriot businessman from their Greek Cypriot owners, with the stated intent of operating them by 2025. By 2024, the president of Northern Cyprus, the same Ersin Tatar, had announced a program to demolish some of the abandoned buildings of Varosha and to restore others, bringing them, in his phrase, into the national economy. By the end of 2025, nearly 5 million people had visited Varosha as tourists since the partial reopening. None of those tourists were the people who had once lived there. There is a thread that runs through this story that is not, finally, about Cyprus, or Turkey, or the politics of the Eastern Mediterranean. It is about what a city looks like when human time is removed from it, and what a city looks like when human time returns to it under different ownership. The island of Hashima, in the south of Japan, the subject of an earlier episode of Hollow Signal, was abandoned in 1974, almost exactly the same year, when the coal it was built to mine ran out. Hashima collapsed in slow motion under wind and salt for 40 years before the Japanese government opened a fragment of it to tourist boats. Varosha collapsed under barbed wire for 46 years before another government opened a fragment of it to sun loungers. The places are not the same. The pattern is. The original residents of Varosha are mostly dead. Some are still living, in their late 70s and 80s, in apartments in Paralimni and Larnaca, where they were told in 1974 to wait until the situation calmed down. Many of them still keep the deeds. Some of them, in interviews recorded over the decades, have said that they do not wish to return to the city as it now is. The Argo Hotel, where Elizabeth Taylor stayed, will not reopen as the Argo Hotel. The Toyota dealership on Leonidas Street will not sell Toyotas again. The umbrella that someone left on the sand on the morning of the 14th of August 1974 was not folded. It rotted on its pole and was eventually hauled away. If this story stayed with you, subscribe. I cover the cases the world forgot.